Hey, there we are. So hi, welcome to our talk about proc for security analysts and how to find forensic evidence in proc. So first off, since we already got the introduction, this is me, Danish. I live in Munich. That's my Twitter handle, X, and LinkedIn. Yeah, and I just got a dog, so Stephan Berger, Swiss, live in Bern. Also works for InfoGuard as part of the C-Cert. Yeah, so an introduction to proc. Essentially, proc is a virtual file system. You've all probably seen it whenever you do an ls/. The directory is there. It's essentially a look into how the kernel sees anything running on the system itself, or at least what it's being presented as for the user. So it gives you a lot of different information about the hardware and the software on the system itself, but it's also vulnerable to actually being manipulated. So you're not always able to actually trust what's in there. So if you ever had a thought about how does PS or list open files, LSOF, actually works, well, PS, if you run it through strace, which is a really nice tool to see how a process or what a process does, you would actually see that PS just runs through the proc directory for the different processes. And if you look at the different numbers, the proc / a number, that's the number for a process. So this is the process ID for the specific process. And within that directory, there's a lot of different information. In this screenshot, you have the status and stat, which is essentially just the status. If you cat that file, we'll look at it a little bit later on, you'll see the status of the process itself, see the parent ID, the process ID, and a lot of other stuff. But you can also find file descriptors, status on the network information, what memory is mapped, and environmental variables, and the command line. But again, those things can also be changed. So if we go into the man pages and just search for proc, you'll actually see there's a lot of different information you can pull out from proc. It was just a screenshot put in there to just show how much different information you're actually able to pull out just by simple commands. So the forensic values of proc itself. Let's say that you have a running process, PS AUX, just listing a random process, kworkd. You will actually be able to go into the proc folder for that specific process ID, and see the command line which is being run off, or at least how it's being shown to you. Again, those things can be changed, but that's at least a place to start. The next thing is the working directory. So where is this process actually running out of? It's a symbolic link. Symbolic link, sorry. So in this case, if we just do an ls on that specific CWD, you'll see that it's running out of temp, which is a little bit odd maybe, especially for a kernel process. And the process environment. This process environment is initiated when the process starts. So if something is changed afterwards, that's actually not being shown in this file itself. So it could be a good place to start if you are looking into the different processes and thinking what kind of different things were set in the environment before starting the process or during the process start. Then the next thing is the file descriptor. So this is all the different files that are opened by the process itself. In this example, we have a VI that's running. And if we look into the FD folder of the proc folder, you'll see that it has a root tools, UAC, swap file open. Again, which can give you a good indication of what is this maybe manipulating, or what are the process reading from, which could give you a lot of different forensic evidence. Then there's the file descriptor itself. Those are again the different files that is open and presented with the inode number. So in Unix systems and Linux systems, there's inode are essentially the metadata showing where the different files are located on a disk. And it's the same thing for network traffic, where you will see the socket colon and then the IO number. And you can use that afterwards if you go into the proc net and figure out what's happening there. Then there's the process mapping, the different memory regions being mapped by the processes itself, which also can be interesting if you're looking for, let's say, modules being loaded in and stuff like that. So that's like a quick overview of the different forensic things that you can actually see in proc. There's a lot more. This is just a general brief overview. If we take one of the practical examples of how would you masquerade a process, I said before that if we look into the command line, and just cat out the command line file in the proc folder, you'll see a command, but it might not be the real command. It could be something that's changed. It's the same thing with the process name itself. So again, if we think about the PS command and where it cycles over the different proc or process folders or status folders in the proc folder, those things can be changed. Again, from the first example was that I said it was a kernel thread. The reason why I'm saying it's a kernel thread was because it was in brackets, and you'll normally see it starting with a K. But that's like the different way a kernel thread is. And one of the big takeaways there are that the parent ID is usually always PID2. I know on some older systems, I think it's actually also PID1, if I remember correct. But in most Linux systems that you'll see, it's PID2. So if we just do a cat on the status file, you'll actually see the PID itself of the process, but you'll also see the PPID, which is the parent ID, and this one is another thing. So that's probably not a kernel process. That's maybe something else. But the name is K-worked, so a little bit weird. The next thing you could maybe detect it on is if you, again, show the kernel process, see K-worked, and then do a cat on maps, so the different memory sections being mapped. You'll see that, first off, home parallels malware, pretty, but it could be something else. But in a kernel process, you wouldn't see anything. It should be empty. So that's, again, a big key thing to know that if you are looking at a kernel thread and there's something in the mapped folder or mapped file, an alert should ring somewhere. Then again, there's also a file called exe. That's actually the executable itself. If you, again, look at a kernel process and do a share sum of that, if you get a share sum, something is wrong. If you get a share sum exe, no such file or directory, then should be a kernel process. Still, again, can be some ifs, but it's a big key takeaway. If you get a share sum, it's something iffy is up. And also, you could take that share sum and put it into bias total, see if somebody already knows it. And again, I marked it down here at the bottom. I don't know if everybody can see it, that if you could tamper with the PS command itself, and you could do that by, for example, doing the LD preload command, where it loads in different processes or into the kernel before actually executing the command. if you do that, and a lot of rootkits does that, you could actually tamper with how you see the PS command. So an example would be if you load it in to say, well, I want to look for the PS command, and then just change whatever output it takes, or maybe just change if you're doing a PS on that specific file, I'll just not show anything. And then again, how would you know? But we'll come back to that. The last thing I wanted to show quickly was the how to maybe recover a process. So it could be that you have malware running where it deletes itself, just spins up into the memory and then deletes it from disk. Again, the CWD, you can see it's in temp. If you have a kernel thread running from temp, that should be a little bit weird. And then you go into the temp folder itself and say, oh yeah, I want to see ls, and it says, I'm not there. I'm gone. Then you might be able to actually pull it out. So if you say ls on the exe file in the proc, you'll see kworked d deleted, but it's still running in memory. So you could take that and copy out that exe from the proc folder into a file, and then you actually have the running. You essentially copied that running process from memory onto the disk itself again, and then you can analyze it.
Open my mic, thank you very much. So the next one is MFD create, so aka fileless malware. The one thing I really love about doing forensics and being a blue teamer, there is no such thing as totally stealth when you're doing red teaming or attacking a system. All these terms like fileless malware, so it's just like the marketing terms of it. So Wiz blogged about last year about PyLoose, Python-based fileless malware targets cloud workloads to deliver crypto miners. Also, a funny thing is about our terms around our craft is those techniques are years old, because also that MFD create technique that goes way back. So, but we are still facing those challenges. We are still facing the same threats. I'm repeating myself in every conference I'm doing. It's always the same. So what we are seeing here, and keep that in mind, without tempf, but except /proc. So we are leaving traces in /proc when we are using memfd create. And also Asset Research blogged about that technique. So the thing is, it's easy to attack, but also easy to detect. On the left-hand side, we see some sample codes. So I, as an attacker, can just use a few lines of Python code, and I can load code into the kernel, into the Linux file system without touching disk. Well, basically we are touching disk with our code, but then again, it's loaded into memory. What you're seeing here, the code C types, that's a Python library for loading or directly calling C libraries. The same C types library you can also use on the Windows. Python-based malware becomes so popular under Windows, especially with these C types libraries. So you can really just load code, shell code into memory with that C types under Windows and under Linux. The thing here is, as a defender, it's also super easy to detect. What you're seeing, if you're just grabbing ls recursively to the proc directory, if you are searching for grep memfd deleted, it will instantly stand out that you have a problem. Or at least it might be legitimate. I doubt so. I personally would look into that. So if you have a scan who regularly check through those different directories, you might spot evil early on. So Symbiote was a rootkit, or is still a rootkit. I personally have to laugh a bit when vendors or security researchers come up with terms like impossible or nearly impossible to detect. I personally think, no, you always leave traces on a file system. The thing here is, every good rootkit, Symbiote tries to cover his tracks when, for example, proc/proc/net/TCP keeps or tracks every TCP connection on a running system. The thing here is, a rootkit, like Asger pointed out, as a rootkit, I can really hook very deep into the system. I can preload libraries which will intercept the output I see as a security analyst or as a security solution. The thing here is, the more you know about Linux, about operating system, about Windows, the more you are able to find different angles to analyze systems. The thing here, keep that in mind, Symbiote only covers one file, so everything is a file in Linux. That TCP is basically just a file. However, when I've done research about that Symbiote and Rootkit and /proc, I figured out that another file under Linux keeps tracks of our TCP connections. It's called nfcontrack, and also based, or it's light in the /proc directory. Within that file, I also see the running connections within my Linux system, my every TCP connection. So just given that I have a Rootkit on my Linux servers, which hides or tamper with the /proc with the /tcp file, then I still have a chance to detect it through that file here. So I just, within some simple lines of code, I could figure out if an entry is missing from the / or from the TCP file, but it's present in the nfcontrack file. That should be, at least also for me as a really sloppy programmer, easy to program. PBFDoor, maybe you've heard of it. It was really huge in the press. A backdoor, like every vendor, mostly on the planet, blogged about it, talked about it. I'm not going really specifically onto the Rootkit, you can read it up, but I'm just picking up here a really interesting topic about that Rootkit. After starting the file on the Linux system, it deleted itself from the disk. But what we learned, however, when you delete something from disk, it can still run on the Linux system. So it's a bit different from Windows to Linux. On the Windows, it's not possible to delete a file which is running. On the Linux, it's possible. But still, what we are seeing here when we do a ps-awk, so list me all the running processes on my system, I see a dbus daemon system. That looks legitimate, doesn't it? Because I have no idea. Maybe not. But as a security analyst, I say, hey, I go to that process ID, that 7163 file, and then I see the symlink, the symbolic link, like Asger pointed out, that really that file pointed to /dev /something, and it's deleted. And I see immediately, if I'm experienced enough, of course, but I see immediately something is fishy here. I have an executable which have another name, so the binary tampered with the name, choose another name, and also deleted itself. Like we learned before from our previous slides, we can still dump that executable from the running process. So I can make /cp /proc /pid /exe and really copy that exe out for further analysis and stuff. What you are seeing here, it's a bit messy, that slide here. It's called messing with /proc. Just keep, so line 1 is important, line 6 and line, like 10 and 15. Basically what we are doing here, we are creating a new folder and we are mounting that empty folder over a folder, a /proc folder. So basically we are just overlaying an existing /proc /pit directory to make it invisible. That technique really works well. I tested it, I blogged about it, and it's super, super interesting to see how with basic technology, how with basic commands you can really hide on a Linux system. However, I really love that talk here, because you also leave traces here. As soon as you mount a directory over another directory, that leaves traces on your system. What we are seeing here is a /proc /mounts directory. On the upper down on the slide, we see that we are mounting the /proc /something or CentOS root over the /proc PID directory. That's an instant red flag you're seeing here. That's not normal. So if you know what to look for on your Linux systems, you should be able to spot evil early on. In the wild, Team TNT used that technique as well. I blogged about it, Integer blogged about it. Please do, if you're not familiar with that technique, I really recommend to look it up, because you might have a detection gap on your systems if you're doing detection engineering or just being a team member of a SOC or so. Coming to the last few slides of our presentation, and then we do a short Q&A. What I also love about /proc is when you're loading a rootkit, and that rootkit is mostly consisting of a kernel module. When you are loading a kernel module onto a kernel, that module is not signed because it's evil. No vendor will sign your kernel module, of course. That will, in quotes, taint the kernel. And when you load a kernel module, the kernel flags the tainting in various log files and also in /proc/mobile modules. When you grab for that term, OE, you see that the kernel module is tainted. So also on the right-hand side, we see a screenshot from Sandfly. Thank you, 5 minutes left. That should be enough. We see a screenshot from Sandfly Security, which they also utilize that technique to map out the difference. Because I think that's really a clever technique here. They checking the kernel process structures, and if the kernel say, hey, I become tainted, and then you don't see the tainted kernel module loaded, you might have a rootkit on your system, which is like hiding the output from you or just mangling with the outputs. And that's the whole beauty about /proc and whole Linux forensics, that you have different angles to look at the file system, to look at your processes. Like checking the output from PS versus checking the output from /proc. If you see a difference from the output, you might have a deeper problem you want to investigate. An open source tool which I can really recommend is Unhide. Unhide is a short, or it's just a subset of bash commands, but essentially it's just doing the same or various techniques we covered in that short 25 minutes here. It do a comparison between various outputs like ls/proc or ps/proc and whatever. That might be a start to find evil on your systems. So if you are doing incident response like Asger and do for a living, that might be also a good start when you are investigating a Linux server, which might be compromised. Again, Asger mentioned it very briefly. You could use a technique called LD preload. On the right-hand side, we see a library, a shared library, which essentially just replaced a statement or a keyword on the fly. So we do a cat statement, DFI rocks, because yeah, it's true. And then we load our shared library into the memory. So what we are doing now, we are intercepting the system call, the right system call, and on the fly, our keywords get changed. So that's a technique which most of the user-land rootkits are utilizing to hide stuff from you. It's super easy to use, super powerful, but on the other hand, it's also super noisy and relatively easy to detect. Again, we see here a VI process. I open that VI statement file. And with the LD preload file in the environment variable, we see it that variable is set on the system. So again, if you are doing Linux forensic, live forensics, check out the /proc PID environment file. There you might see that a rootkit, a userland rootkit, is hooking your system calls. And we talked about maps, so the memory maps within a process, and there again we see our shared object mapped into the process. There is not such a thing that you could hide on a system. You could. 2 minutes. I'm coming to my last slide. Bang on time. Again, we talked about rootkits. One of the most popular rootkits is diamorphine. A lot of attackers, also APT groups, are using such publicly available rootkits. One of them is, again, diamorphine. If you are loading diamorphine on a kernel, that thing also get loaded into the system memory. And here again, in that /proc/call sysm file, we might have a chance to find evil on our system. Just to wrap up on my last minute here, we showed you really briefly different techniques how you could utilize the information in /proc to find evil. I'm a huge fan of all that /proc about Linux forensics. You must dig deeper into the system, and you must be really proficient about file system forensic and forensic as well to really seek evil. But personally, I'm a huge believer there is not such thing as completely stealth on a system, and we as a blue teamer, we will find you. I can guarantee you that. Thank you for the attention.
So thank you. Where are the questions to those splendid and experienced people?
Hi, super interesting talk. Thank you very much. I have a question about the deleted binaries. Is there any common valid use case for a binary to delete itself and have the deleted tag? Or is that a very strong indicator that there's something wrong? So if you're completely clueless, would it be sensible to do a search just for deleted executables?
I would say there might be a use case somewhere where you would delete yourself, but in most cases it would stand out, because why would you delete from the file system itself? So it would be a pretty good indicator of something should be looked into.
Same. Yes. 99% I would say it's malicious.
Yeah.
Hello. Regarding the deleted file, just think about updates. When you, for example, replace a binary, then it is deleted. So having a deleted file in proc is perfectly legit.
Yeah, but then you would still reload the service because you would need the new update. Otherwise, you would run.
I can reload at any time later.
Sure.
So this
sure,
happens,
but
this happens.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, that would be a valid reason, but you would still be running on an outdated software version. If you're updating, why would you update and not run it?
Because I first install it, then I decide to, for example, reboot later or do it later. So I see this. I see this in the wild.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
and
it's
one more
a valid
input. You didn't mention it. There's also a second interface to get Linux processes through a netlink. So there's a generic netlink interface. So when you don't trust /proc, you can always use netlink. And most rootkits don't know about netlink.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I mean, there will always be edge cases. So, like you're an example, look for the working directory of the process, whatever. Just doing detection engineering is not straightforward in most cases. It's really about whitelisting, blacklisting, like looking at different angles. But thank you.
Thank you for your talk. I have a similar question to the first question, but kind of more of a follow-up. If these are strong indicators of compromise, then why don't we see this in endpoint detection?
There's actually a really good guy who also makes the DFR report, who just made an EDR detection matrix, and it turns out that EDRs on Linux are really bad at doing their job.
Yes, his name is Kostas.
Yeah, Kostas. Yeah,
genau.
Yeah, I couldn't remember.
Any more questions, please?
And maybe to follow up, don't always trust the EDR. It's not a one silver bullet.
Last chance for last question.
Everybody needs a coffee, same as me. So
Exactly. So now there is the coffee break running outside. Feel free to always go to those two very experienced people and ask them anything you like on the proc file system. Thank you again, Oju.
thank you.